Montana, a land of mountains, rivers, and lakes. It's why we live here and why people visit. But something is threatening our clean, clear waters. Aquatic invasive species are knocking at Montana's door. And everywhere they've gotten a foothold, they've wreaked havoc on aquatic systems.
Aquatic invasive species are species that aren't native. They're not from around here. And when they are introduced, typically by humans, they cause problems with the environment. They disrupt recreation, habitats, water-based infrastructure like hydroelectric facilities and irrigated agriculture.
The list of invasive species threatening Montana's waters includes snails, mussels, plants, amphibians, fish, crayfish, and more. In fact, there are over 100 species with the potential to invade. While that can seem overwhelming, with just a basic knowledge of the issue, you can help protect Montana's waters. So let's go a little deeper and get your knowledge up to speed. Let's start by taking a look at plant invasions. Typically, invasive plants grow in extremely dense mats. This tremendous growth overwhelms an area and is often referred to as a monoculture.
It's just nothing but plant material from top to bottom. And prevents boats from launching and moving through it. You can't swim in it. And then it outcompetes native species too. It really degrades habitat. Fish don't like it. It degrades water quality, warms up the water.
Swimmers have died because they've just become so entangled. They try to fight, they get exhausted and drown.
So it just takes a little piece to start a new population. So a little piece stuck to a boat trailer, to a propeller of a boat. The boat launches, that little piece floats off and can start a whole new population.
The thing to remember about invasive plants is that they generally grow to overwhelm an area. This is bad for native plants and animals. It can make recreation difficult, and it can also clog up water diversions and irrigation pipes. The other key thing to remember is that entirely new populations can grow from a single fragment of the plant transported on boats and other gear. You don't have to know how to identify plant species. You can simply keep an eye out for plant fragments on boats and other gear and stop them from entering our waters. Now, let's take a look at a few animals that pose the biggest threat to Montana's waters.
There's a number of different invasive snails out there. Most of them are related to aquarium species, where people dump an aquarium and you introduce the snail species to a new place, and then they reproduce like crazy.
In addition to aquarium dumping, snails can be introduced by hitchhiking on items like boats, waders, or other hunting and fishing gear, and on irrigation equipment.
There's a lot of different invasive species snails that we have in Montana and others that we don't have. Things like New Zealand mud snails are kind of the big problem that we have in Montana. And, you know, as they're scraping off that algae and other life on the rocks and things like that, they're impacting native species that would be using those same food resources. You know, they are always clinging on things, and so it's really easy to move them around. They can hook onto boats, they can hook onto their wading gear, shoelaces, nooks and crannies, felt waders. These New Zealand mud snails can take a ride somewhere else, and so you see it happen in a lot of fishing waters where people are using those waters to fish. You see those New Zealand mud snails, especially in southwest Montana.
Rusty crayfish are another species of concern. They like to eat plants too, or clip plants, so they really change the aquatic habitat and outcompete native species. They are typically introduced through people dumping bait. So invasive carp are another concern. We don't have those in Montana, so we're really concerned about keeping those out. Those are introduced through bait buckets and that type of thing.
Among all the invasive plants and animals, one group stands out as the biggest threat to Montana's waters and our way of life: mussels, specifically zebra and quagga mussels.
So for invasive species, zebra and quagga mussels are absolutely our biggest concern, just because of their economic damage potentially to the state as well as habitat. They basically mine the bottom out of the food chain and remove food, and so it's not available for other species.
And they can attach themselves to any hard substrate, whether it's a dock pylon or a cobble, and they just basically stack on top of one another. They can grow to about 10,000 individuals in a square meter or more.
And so they clog up pipes, they clog up water intakes on boats, that type of thing. They obstruct flow, stick to cooling pipes in the turbines and hydroelectric facilities, and prevent power generation, which increase increases maintenance costs for things like that. When we talk about irrigated agriculture, you're always moving water. These guys grow, stick to the pipes, the inside of pipes, and then continue to grow on top of each other until they totally occlude the flow. So they cause significant problems. There's a number of cost estimates out there, but it ranges in the billions of dollars.
Finding small mussels attached to a surface is relatively easy. However, mussels present a unique early detection challenge because their life cycle includes a microscopic free-floating stage. These little veligers, as they are called, are only visible with a microscope in a lab.
So boats are the main vector for the spread for zebra and quagga mussels. Every time a boat backs into a lake, they might pull their bilge plug first, which empties that water. Those little microscopic veligers, the larvae, might be in that bilge water. And so those areas around boat ramps and docks are the likely areas of introduction.
The list of invasive animals goes on. The thing to remember about invasive animal species is that they generally outcompete native species, multiply in great numbers, and change ecosystems dramatically. And with mussels, the financial impacts can run into the billions. Because the stakes are so high, Montana is working on many fronts to stop any invasion before it starts. First, Montana runs mandatory watercraft check stations across the state. All watercraft entering Montana must be inspected, and visitors with watercraft must purchase an AIS prevention pass before they launch. It's the law.
Transport of these invasive species typically isn't intentional, and that's why we call them aquatic hitchhikers. They kind of stick onto things and move, and people may not even often aren't aware that they're actually on there.
Mussel veligers can live in a small pool of water for up to 3 days. And so a boat coming from Minnesota can make it over to Montana within 2. Those hitchhikers could be viable and could reproduce in the next water body that they inhabit.
That's why we have these inspection stations set up roadside, so that anybody that's coming into the state, they're not aware they're transporting anything, and we take a close look at it and make darn sure that there's nothing on there. And also the standing water. So invasive species in standing water in a live well or ballast tanks, bilge water, that type of thing, you won't see the invasive species in there, but they're there, they're microscopic.
Montana also runs outreach and education programs across the state to spread the clean, drain, dry message. And biologists and citizen scientists are actively monitoring countless lakes and rivers across the state for the first signs of an invasion.
Yeah, there's some stuff in here.
In this battle for Montana's waters, our first line of defense is you.
Raft guides, fishing guides, tackle shop workers are very important because they are the front line of educating the public as they come in. A lot of out-of-state folks don't realize the importance of aquatic invasive species and what their impacts could cause to the state of Montana and our precious waters. We need partners to help us, and there are a lot of people who are excited to help. They care about this water just as much as we do.
I mean, we don't have a lot of these invasive species that are causing significant issues in other places in the country, and they're preventable. We don't have to get them. It's a human-caused problem. So we have a great opportunity to keep them out, and getting more people aware of that and involved in that, the better chance we have of protecting our waters.